Okay, good evening, everyone. Really? Hey, welcome to all of our virtual attendees joining via Zoom and all of our chapters and guests to join us via on demand via our YouTube channel from here until hopefully 10 or 15 years from now. I'm always amazed that it's still free to upload as many meetings as we have on YouTube, and there's never a charge, but eventually there's a charge for everything. So. Just a couple of admin remarks in the room. Coffee in the back. It's great to see a full room on a nice hot summer Wednesday, the first Wednesday of June. But if you do need coffee, not to stay awake for your speaker, but maybe woke up at 3 o'clock this morning, coffee's back there. Okay, I'm Mr. Matt Lowy. I've had the honor of being your chapter president for 2 years come next week. This isn't a dictatorship, so my position will be up for chapter elections this summer. We had some problems with the e-elections from PMI Global in the fall and winter, so I know I've talked to a couple of you today that put in your name in the hat for positions in the fall. Those will carry over for the ballot. So we'll be open this cycle this summer. Hopefully, towards the end of the month, after we put the nomination call back out, we'll be chapter president, vice president of marketing, vice president of innovation and technology. Those are two positions that are new, but that will fill a need to make sure that you guys get as much value as members. And then vice president of communications and special projects and operations. So stay tuned on the next newsletter, and there'll be more information there. If you are interested in short-term volunteering and don't want to make a 2-year commitment, which is what the board seat. Just making sure our virtual people are good. There will be a volunteer dashboard that'll debut next week with short-term projects centered around adding membership value. So if you're currently in a occupation pivot or just have some time on your hands with what the summer season brings in terms of kids at camp and things of that nature, we'd still love the support. We've gotten some great ideas in our surveys recently, so stay tuned for that as well. Sure. Anywhere from a day or two to 2 or 3 weeks. And the question, a day or two, like a gig type thing or a project. And the questions for those online was what the time commitment for the volunteering is. And then going back, good question. The board position, so that's a 2-year term, probably on average 3 to 6 hours a month. So thank you for the question. Okay, coming soon, next Tuesday, June 9th, the standard for artificial intelligence and portfolio program and project management will be released. That will be free to all active paid PMI members, not chapter members, but like your $160, $170 a month to PMI. So next Tuesday, you'll be logging into your PMI dashboard just like you would to the PMBoK and download this AI standard. The CPMI AI certification that's been popular the past year and a half, some of that is duplicative, but still good information. And this is the first ANSI standard to really capture AI. And there's, from my perspective, there's not that gold standard certification. There's not like the CISSP like there is for cyber people. Or if they have that, they know AI. If somebody has a PMP, they at least know project management. We don't really have that for AI right now. Google has some for Gemini, AWS has some for their AI offerings, but there's not really that. If you have that certification, you know AI. CPMA AI isn't really that either, but it's good that we at least have a standard, and hopefully in the next year to 2 years, there'll be that gold standard certification of being an AI practitioner, at least. Yes, sir. Good question. Let me do some research, unless there's anyone here that could answer that. Okay. Okay, so next Tuesday, and we'll put a link on our newsletter. So, but yeah, I'm sure it'll be 300 or 400 pages of AI generated fodder, but it's still at least where all the hardworking people across the globe in PMI put in their time and effort. Okay, so for those of you who registered before a week and a half ago, this presentation was supposed to be from one of the program managers for Madison Square Garden Entertainment. We're over the moon that we do have our speaker today, but we are cheering for the Knicks, so our previous speaker is in a good mood, and maybe he'll come back again to share what went into the Sphere and just kind of program management from more of a commercial high-level entity like Madison Square Garden Entertainment is. So, yep. Okay, the program manager. My apologies. And I am the chapter president. So hopefully we'll get that rescheduled virtually after the NBA Finals. Game one's tonight. So we'll try to get you out of here around 8:50, so you're at least home by halftime. Okay, if everyone pulls out their book raffle ticket, that should be on their person. Back in 2019, Range, which was a book centered around generalists and specialists, and how generalists have more of a competitive advantage in the 21st century than specialists, even though conventional wisdom is kind of the opposite of that. So we were honored to have David Epstein be our symposium keynote speaker in October of 2019. And his latest follow-up book they released last month, Inside the Box, How Constraints Make Us Better, had a few weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. This recent one, it fell off, but I'm confident it'll come back. And we're in moderately progressed discussions with his publishing company about him coming back to talk to the chapter sometime this year. But until then, we have 2 books to raffle off that are signed that we got from his book launch at Politics and Prose on Connecticut Avenue. A great plug for local bookstores. So if everybody pulls those out. First number, 7805. Yep. Hey, we got a winner. Thank you, man. Congratulations. We trust him. If we can't trust the PM, who can we trust? And I'm 80% done with the book, but I think we've always been taught, oh, think outside the box. Like, what makes you unique? What's the WIFM? Like, why should people trust you with a project or a job? Like, if you just think like everybody else. But this kind of shows success stories of working within constraints. So it's interesting read. And the second number is 7799. Hey, another winner. And we met earlier. This is our first chapter meeting, so a round of applause for her. Yeah. And with that said, if those who are online virtually for the first time or online here in person with us in the great city of Rockville could stand up and be acknowledged if this is the first chapter event you've been to. A round of applause for them. Thank you for your attendance and your trust, and we hope you'll come back. If we have any golfers in the room, one of our chapter members is on the board of the Alliance Secure for a cavernous malformation. That would be next week at a golf course just up 270 off of exit 26 So stay tuned in the newsletter for that. We're one of the few chapters in the global landscape of chapters in every continent to offer 95% of our content on YouTube for on-demand recording. There's PDU claim links as well as chapter survey information if it's within enough relevant time. So if you need background noise, if you're in a remote job or a teleworking job, if you're getting the emails that you're 10 to 15 PDU short and you have a renewal window open, this is a great opportunity. We had 3 lunch and learns in the month of May from topics of the evolving PM toolkit to how AI and natural language processing is changing life coaching and business coaching with avatars and making our coaches better. And then this past Friday with a branding LinkedIn presentation. So free to watch. The self-claim for PMI PDUs isn't too strenuous. So use that as a resource. If you have any questions, all of our board members are happy to help you. We're also one of the few chapters in the global landscape that have a sister Toastmasters chapter. We can all improve public speaking. For the last 6 minutes, you've been thinking, this guy needs to improve his public speaking. So I'll be going to a couple of Toastmasters chapters meetings this summer, but we have their leadership team here, so we'll turn it over to them for some information. Round of applause for them.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alan Zheng. I'm VP of Membership at PMI-Montgomery County Toastmasters Club. How are you doing? All right. So please raise your hand if you read the recent chapter newsletter. A few. I'm not sure if you noticed that information about our Toastmaster Club recently pop up in those newsletters. In fact, in the late April edition, there was a featured section about our club, highlighting a recent club meeting and gave people a glimpse into how we conduct our meeting. And we actually received quite few inquiries asking for more information about our club. And believe it or not, several folks even attended our meeting and became our members. So thank you, Matt and team, for including our information in the newsletter. And we plan to share more activities with our chapter members. People join Toastmasters for different reasons with different goals. Some want to improve their public speaking skills. Some want to deliver a killer presentation. And some just want to be a better listener and give constructive feedback. You may be curious about how exactly Toastmaster can help us improve our communication skills. So we followed a process. It is a learn, practice, improve process. But this is not a linear process. It is a spiral process. As we repeat these steps, we also elevate ourselves. And Toastmaster International has a very rigorous curriculum. It offers a number of self-assessments that allow our members to understand their various communication styles and identify gaps and pick an area or pathway to focus on. And each pathway has 5 levels. And in each level, there are a number of projects. And we repeat this process. Learn, practice, improve in every project. So I can guarantee you, if you follow this path, you will notice the differences. So in the future, we are going to introduce, tell more about these pathways, and I'm going to turn the mic to my colleague, Supreme.
Thank you, Alan. So good evening, everyone. And as Alan was talking, I actually recently went through a leadership program at work where I actually used a lot of the skills that I learned in Toastmasters. And that was something for me, which I was able to look at and talking about just communication skills, even thinking about leadership styles. In Toastmasters, we actually have a speech that we have to do where we have to discover our own leadership style. And when I was actually applying for my leadership program, that was one of the questions. And I was able to actually go back and take the speech I had, and thanks to Gemini, was able to take that 5-minute speech and literally boil it down into 500 words so that I could put it as part of my application. So definitely I can see from when I started in Toastmasters to my journey now, sort of the success that I've seen and also like the growth I've seen overall. And for me personally, I came in wanting to be a better public speaker because I hate public speaking, but it also along the way taught me more about my leadership styles, my communication skills, all of that. And with that, I'd like to invite everyone to our meetings. We have 3 meetings a month. The second and fourth Wednesday are virtual on Zoom. And then the third Wednesday, we meet in person, currently at Rockville Library. And the meetings, we start at 7 o'clock. We have a little bit of a social hour for the first like 10, 15 minutes. Then we get the meeting started, and we always try and wrap up by 8:30, so about an hour and a half. And for people with a PMI, the extra added advantage for the Toastmasters, you also get PDUs. If you become a member in a year, you're able to get 54 PDUs that go towards your recertification. And so if you have any questions, come see Alan and myself. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Matt.
Okay, I know we have one attendee here that has a position to fill, but if anyone's seeking a position or is interested in a career pivot and wants to take the mic for a quick 30-second elevator speech, we invited everybody up. Ma'am.
Hello, good evening. I'm going to put a plug into the Toastmasters group. A few years ago, I was a member of that group and been part of a member for a while, but thinking about joining it again. So really good, good group, and really appreciate the time that I had there. I am Gay Most. I live locally here, and I work for a company, X Energy. You may have heard it recently in the news. Hopefully you have heard it in the news. We are part of a group that is building the next generation of small modular reactors. We have positions open in various fields in project management, scheduling, project controls leads, project controls manager. There is an estimating. So we are looking to build out a team. We are local. We are on Gaither Road. So I would encourage you, if you are interested in going into a company, we are a fairly young company, about 2009, but we are building a lot of the projects, building out our processes. Yes, we have processes, but I would still consider ourselves something of a group that's like, we've got a lot to do and we have a lot of things to build. So project management is a big component of making sure that we can deliver on this. So if you are interested or have other people interested, you can come see me at the table today, or I just encourage you to go to our website, xenergy.com, and there is a field that says careers. And if you search on either project management, there are some other areas within our company called project management, but there's also an area that I come from, project controls. If you filter on that, it'll show you approximately 10 to 11 positions. So again, if you're interested, love to have you reach out to us and certainly come talk to me in person if you have additional questions.
And for our virtual members, if you just want to put something in chat, if you're interested, I can link you up tomorrow morning. And then we had another chapter member. So round of applause for him.
Hi, folks. My name is Anand Pillai. I'm a PMP as well as TOGAP certified enterprise architect. And I've been working on data strategy and cloud transformation projects for the last 1 decade. And also was involved in AI and ML work at Fannie Mae. I'm currently looking for jobs in enterprise architecture related to AI and ML. I appreciate if anybody wants or has a position for me. Thank you.
Oh, sure. And then Mr. Gerhart.
I'm supposed to log in. Well, good evening, everybody. When I walked in the door, I thought I was in a job search, but based on what Matt was telling me, I'm actually in a career pivot, which sounds a lot more sexy. So I think I want to use that one going forward. But call it what you will. I'm looking for a position in project or programming management. I've been working in that area for about 25 years. Worked on global compliance programs, business transformation through technology. What else? A few other things, including PMO design and operations. Over the course of my career, I've worked in pharmaceuticals, biotech, telecommunications, chemicals, and industrial gases. And so if any of these kind of keywords that I've mentioned makes you think of something, I'd love to talk to you after the event tonight. Thank you very much.
Oh, sure.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sia Wantor. I am currently in education, but I started off my career working in the project management office. I have an information systems management degree and I'm an MBA. And I started off wanting to be in project management, but then I, moved into education because of family planning and having kids and all of that. So this is exciting for me because I'm getting back into what I wanted to do initially. So yes, I can do anything. Please reach out to me, and I'm going to be reaching out to Gail.
Hello, everyone. First meeting here. My name is Dimitri Harvey. I'm looking into pivot into the project management role. Currently working on my CAPM certification. I do my exam next month. Anything, whether it be assistant project management coordinator or an analyst, if you have anything that's open. My background is operation. So operations, whether it be healthcare or anything that you have. I will just want to get my foot in the door. All right. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Francisco Colon. I just moved to the area from Puerto Rico this past March. I'm interested in looking for a job or thought partnership, what have you. I'm PMP certified. I also have my Scrum Master, my CSM, and my certified product owner from Scrum Alliance as well. Part of my background is in mechanical engineering from Penn State. Sorry for any terrapins in the house. I'm an Indy Lion. And I also have a global executive MBA from the University of Miami. So if you're from the ACC, also, I'm sorry. So yeah, the reason why I bring that up is because I wanted you all to know that I see that things in organizations as a system thinker, as a machine where you have different levels to pull based on the situation that you're in. And also I understand that there's different cultural nuances whenever you go into a situation, especially since we're, globally diverse team here and cohort in this room. I'm sure we have different buttons to push in order to make sure that we can work together effectively. So also looking for a job, part of the industries that I've worked in is in telecommunications, financial services, mostly on the digital transformation side, data, cloud projects as well. I haven't worked for energy, so I'll be talking to Gay after this meeting as well. Thank you so much. And give it up for Matt Lowy for making sure this organization runs like a clock, and for the wait staff also. They're great.
Yeah, my name is Gideon Jembe. I've gotten my background in different fields. I've worked in finance, I've worked in IT companies, and also in construction company. I got degrees in information technology as well as project management. Also, I got certified last year, but currently I work in healthcare company, but I'm open to more opportunities where I could actually put to practice my knowledge in all these different fields. I will be speaking to the madam that spoke earlier on, also to see what are the possibilities with her. But to any other person who has something for me, please just wave on me. I will come over. Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Pradeep Bakshi. I work in IT for 30 years. I'm a project manager. I'm certified in PMP, CISSP, and IDLE 4, as well as quite a few technical certifications. So I'm looking for a position in project management, especially technical project management. I've done a lot of cloud migrations and assessments, security assessments, and I've led a couple projects, all sorts of projects through and multiple teams concurrently. I specifically lead cloud teams, DevSecOps, application development, QA, and database administration teams. If anyone has any interesting positions, I'd love to talk about it. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I am Gail Rankin. I work for Amex, AMYX. I say small company compared to the, SAIC and Accentures and all that. But we are primarily project management, IT systems. I've been blessed beyond measure. This month is my 20th year with this company. So with that just tells I'm dedicated. I've worked for two people, the Air Force and this company. So it's 40 years, and I'm loving all of it. So I only speak because I believe in our company, and our company is good and it takes care of our people. We do have jobs, so if you do look AMYX, and we get emails on Fridays about all the hot jobs and openings that are out there. So if you are interested, they are venturing outside of DoD, but I've supported DLA, Defense Logistics Agency, all 20 years in different positions. So if you are IT interest, we do go a little out, some healthcare, not a lot, but it's still done primarily project management. So please take a look. If you find Amex, look, I think I'm the only Gail in the company, definitely the only Black female Gail in the company. So if you get out there, just look me up, and I would definitely love to provide more info about different positions that kind of know people and know different areas. So I just wanted to offer, so many people are looking for jobs that, some of us small people like Gay's company, you don't think about us little guys, but 20 years is a pretty good track record, I think. So thank you.
Okay, free training alert. Amazon Web Services has their annual summit at the DC Convention Center, June 30th and July 1st, 350 sessions, all for free. They don't come with PDUs, but if you're looking to kind of pivot or learn more about AWS, this is a good time. If you're telling yourself, oh, I'm not technical, no one's born technical. So spend the next couple of weeks learning more about AWS, and then the summit will be good for you. Okay, congratulations are in order. The month of May, look out of our 2,000 members, we had a lot of certifications. Andrew is online with us tonight, so congratulations on his PMP. And then we are continuing to see, I think we're up to 9 certified professionals in managing AI, the CAPM certification. So round of applause for everyone who put in the time to pass that up. And then our chapter motto is being all about the members. So it means the world that we've had 2 members hit their 20-year mark, and then 4 members hit their 15-year mark. So a round of applause for them. Our sister chapters are doing great things. PMI-WDC has their monthly meeting in 2 Wednesdays from today. So that'll be a virtual event. PMI Baltimore is spending their summer on networking events, but if you're in that Ellicott City, Columbia area, that's a great opportunity to meet some new PM professionals in your network, especially if you're looking for a career pivot. And PMI Silver Screen, their speaker, usually they have the second Wednesday of the month and compete with our Toastmasters chapter. Their speaker would only talk on the first Wednesday, so that's today. So they're in a little bit of competition with us, but healthy competition is good. So. And then just a reminder that our monthly meeting summer break will start this evening. So we'll return to the first Wednesday of the month cadence, the first Wednesday of September. I think you have better things to do on July 4th than be down here, but we will be offering virtual content and hope to have like a breakfast or a luncheon down here in the summer months to continue to offer you PDU opportunities. Okay, without further ado, our featured speaker for the evening is Mr. Jeff Beverage. He has a laundry list alphabet soup after his name that he's earned, but the most important thing and most impressive thing is his company is an authorized training partner, which PMI Global gives. They don't give that easily and make everybody an authorized training partner, so you really have to go through the wickets and prove that you're delivering information that makes project managers and program managers better. So he is that, and you'll see that he serves as the CIO and primary educator for his company, Corner Post Management Experts. I think that's a typo, so my apologies. Jesus gave me a plug, and I already messed up. So that should be 15 years of diverse experience in different disciplines within their world, and most importantly, it's the Stanley Cup Finals right now. We had an exciting Game 1 last night, and Mr. Beveridge is an avid amateur ice hockey player as recently as last night. And hockey at once you pass the age of 40 hurts, and it's hard. So it's good to have the toughest speaker we've ever had, and we welcome Mr. Beveridge to our stage.
Thank you so much. Able to hear me okay? Good evening, my friends, and welcome. Happy Wednesday to you all. It's very exciting to be here. I imagine I'm looking right here for our virtual folks. It's great to be seeing and, well, not seeing, but working with you as well. And to anybody that watches this on YouTube in the future, great to get to know you. I just have to follow up on what he just said about my illustrious ice hockey playing. We actually do, my team, one of the 2 teams I play on has a game tonight, and I was first contacted by Bill and thought, wow, I'm kind of busy that night, you know, and then I realized actually I'm on 2 teams and both of those teams have 2 games per week. So this would have been my 3rd of 4 games tonight. And as Matt just mentioned, it actually, once you're past 40, it kind of hurts to do that. So I am thrilled to be here, not working out my legs and various muscles in and around my legs. Surely the boys will have fun without me tonight, and I'll see them again tomorrow. So appreciate those warm words of welcome. It's funny when you present at an event like this, they ask you to send in a bio, and you always try to write it with this very flowery language that makes you sound like a really impressive person. And then you realize that somebody's going to read it out loud right in front of you and then expect you to stand up in front of everybody right after they do that. So I've tried to sort of downsize the bio a little bit from the paragraphs upon paragraphs that they used to have to read when I would show up to events like this. So without further ado, I'm here tonight to talk to you on the topic that you can see, bridging the gap, connecting PMBoK guide best practices to federal project and program management competencies. I have, like many in the DC area. Worked as a contractor supporting the federal government for a long period of time, doing a large handful of things, and most recently and currently for the past 10 years, my focus has been on providing project management and leadership training to the federal environment and on other environments as well. But I spend most of my days teaching FAC-P certification training classes, the Federal Acquisition Certification in Program/Project Management, which is a mouthful, and we'll talk all about it. I'm curious, are there any federal employees here in the room? Small handful. Excellent, excellent. Any federal contractors, not federal employees, but contractors? Another large handful. That's excellent. So to some of you, maybe you're already well familiar with everything I'm about to say. That's great. You get PDUs anyway. Some of you who didn't raise hands for either of those questions might not at all be interested in anything I'm about to say, and you get PDUs as well. So it's all good. It's going to be fine. So connecting PMBoK guide best practices to federal PM competencies. Ultimately, what I want to do here tonight is just talk a little bit about FAC-P certification, how it is similar to and different from PMP certification and kind of guidance that we get from the PMBoK guide, with the particular focus and goal of helping not only federal project and program managers, but also federal contractors and those working in adjacent industries recognize where they might be speaking the same language, recognize where we sometimes might not be speaking the same language, and maybe bridge some of those gaps, as the presentation is titled. So again, already got that glowing introduction from Matt. Thank you so much for that. Again, my name is Jeff Beverage, which is ridiculous, but it's the name I was born with and the name I've grown to love. I got a whole rack of certifications, as was mentioned. I do the work that I do because I'm a passionate educator. I love teaching. It's so much fun. I wear my throat out all day, every day, and I have an absolute blast doing it. And as was mentioned, I'm an avid ice hockey player and arguably an amateur farmer. I would give all of the credit to my amazing wife on that front. She's a green thumb and an animal whisperer. Like, if you're wondering, how do you get a baby bunny rabbit to pose on your shoulder? My wife just tells it that it has to do that, and that's how it works. So enough about me, because it's my professional headshot. It's the only picture I sent them. And I always say when I'm going over that bio slide, we put those at the beginning of the presentation to, quote, establish credibility. I mean, just prove that I'm allowed to be here. I think I'm allowed to be here. And if after an hour, roughly less than an hour, if I haven't convinced you of that credibility, well, then we got a real problem. But in the meantime, it seems like I'm forcing it on you. So enough about me. Our objectives for tonight. Exactly. Jeff, never mind. I won't even get into it. I'm ad-libbing already. So our objectives for tonight, we want to understand some common project and program management certifications and where they come from, both in government and private industry. We want to describe the factors that contribute to complexity within and around the federal environment, and do a little bit of crosswalk to describe similarities and differences between PMBoK guide guidance and federal PM competencies, most notably in the FAC-P space. We're already knee-deep into the introduction. We'll talk about some of those common certifications. We'll talk specifically about FAC-P, and I'll save as much time as I can, which is all of the time that you would want to take for any questions that you have. I'll stay as long as you need for questions that you have. So starting just with some overview of things that you already know. We know that PMP certification is the global standard, always has been, always will be, fingers crossed, always will be for project management, global, industry agnostic. No matter what you do, your company does projects, whether you know it or not. And so we see PMP certification as that global standard. It was very exciting to see just now so many folks in the room and online who've recently become PMP certified, folks that are currently pursuing PMP or CAPM or other certifications. And we know that PMI has a whole rack of other certifications that one can attain through project management or for project management, many of which are directly based on the PMBoK guide or other sort of companion publications specific to those topics. It was exciting to kind of hear the mention of that AI standard that's being released soon, because we know that they've come up with some brand new certifications, more focused on AI, some of the construction certifications, green project manager, some of those newer certifications that weren't necessarily around when maybe many of us were getting our PMP for the first time. Still very much the global standard. As you know, we're on version 8 of the PMBoK guide. And for those of you that just took the test, awesome job, because of course you don't have to worry about version 8 on your exam, whereas everybody taking the exam starting a month from now would have to worry about that. Again, things that you already know, so I'll stay kind of quick on this slide. You know, the PMBoK guide, of course, goes through updates every couple of years, and the past few versions have definitely seen some larger than previous changes. As we went from version 6 to version 7, there were a lot of dramatic changes in terms of the omission of prescriptive processes, the move towards value delivery, and less emphasis on, again, the prescriptive approach, more emphasis on do what works, find your way of working, do what works, make sure it's adding value. And that was a great improvement in the sense that it helped project managers realize what has already been been stated in the PMBoK guide, that project management processes, tools, and techniques are tailorable and scalable to the needs of the project. So there's always been this understanding of find your way of working, do what works, make sure it's adding value. But with version 7 of the PMBoK guide, they really leaned hard into that and say, hey, don't even mistake it for prescriptive processes. Some, myself included, found that in areas it maybe went a little bit too far in that direction, in the sense of, well, wait a second, what's the definition of a project though? Or are there any tools or techniques that we want to talk about? And that's where in version 8, we're really kind of getting back to that with the 7 performance domains, getting back to the 5 focus areas, which we used to know as process groups, and kind of, as it says on the slide, reconciling that structure with flexibility. No longer, still not prescriptive processes, but there are processes, so forth and so on. So that's what we know about PMI and the PMBoK guide and the PMP approach to project management training and certification. In the federal environment, we often find that there's, especially among federal employees, perhaps, if not less awareness of, perhaps less knowledge about PMP certification specifically. And one of the reasons for that, and I think the federal employees, the federal contractors would definitely relate to this, and I don't think anybody would be offended by it. And understanding that in the federal environment, there is always this mindset of, if it wasn't written specifically for the federal government, it must be not for the federal government. And I think we would all probably acknowledge that's not really true. PMBoK is the global standard. A project is a project anywhere you go. But perhaps there was this mindset of, well, wasn't really for the federal environment. And even sometimes among federal employees, the impression might be, oh, that's for the contractors. The contractors follow the PMBoK guide. The contractors manage the project. I'm getting just a small handful of head nods here in the room for the virtual folks. So it sounds like I'm not way off base by saying this. Hopefully not telling tales outside of school, right? Now, all that said, PMP is highly valued in the federal space. When you talk to people who know what they're talking about, many federal employees are PMP certified. They value PMP certification. You see it as a requirement for key personnel on contracts and or solicitations for contracts and so forth. So it's definitely valued. And in the federal space where we see other certifications like FAC-P PM and what used to be called DWIA, what they're really trying to do is kind of fill that gap between what the PMBoK guide would tell us about project management in any environment and the unique constraints of the federal and specifically the federal acquisition environment. So it's not that PMP isn't valued, right? Remains the global standard. And federal projects and programs, most of what we teach in FAC-PPM training, straight out of the PMBoK guide. Project management is project management anywhere you go. The definition of a risk or a risk response doesn't change just because of the color of the badge that you're wearing, right? But we know that in the federal environment, there are certainly many unique constraints. Every organization has their own unique constraints. In the federal environment, they're heavily regulated unique constraints, very visible unique constraints. So some of the things that we could point to, and we'll talk about some of these in more detail a little bit later on. First and foremost, the federal funding cycle. I was just talking about this with a class of students. We ended our class on this topic today. If you want to spend $1 today, you had to ask Congress for it last year. You had to think about asking Congress for it the year before that. You had to think about thinking about asking Congress for it a year before that. And, 2 to 5 years in advance or more for the really big stuff, we obviously don't know the specifics of exactly what the work will be to be able to, accurately budget for it. So that's one of the big unique constraints of the federal environment. And again, I think it's something that exists in a lot of organizations, but is especially true and is heavily regulated in the federal environment, where the earliest budget decisions predate by a long degree the concrete decisions of what we're doing and realistic cost estimates for on the project itself. The budget for the fiscal year got approved long before we even decided we were doing this small project, perhaps. So multi-year appropriation cycles, being effective stewards of taxpayer dollars. The other big unique consideration and constraint of the federal environment is the acquisition process, heavily regulated by the Federal Acquisition Regulation for civilian agencies and the DFARS, Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation, if I'm not mistaken there, for DoD agencies as well. And again, something that I always talk about with my students is I completely understand why in the federal environment they might think the acquisition is the main thing. An acquisition is what we're managing. Project management is just, some tools and techniques that could help with that. But the acquisition is the main thing. And I get it. Acquisition has been heavily regulated by law for almost 250 years, almost to the day. Okay, actually, whatever, but you get the idea. For hundreds of years, there have been laws about how the government acquires goods and services from entities that are not the government. Hundreds of years. For hundreds of years, there have been laws about how the government spends money. Hundreds of years. For how many years have there been laws about how the government manages projects? Roughly 10, if you wanted to think of PMIA, the Program Management Improvement Accountability Act, as one of the most notable of those laws. Among many federal employees that I talk to, they've still never heard of that legislation 10 years into it. So point is, it's just not the heavily regulated part, and that's where the emphasis kind of steers towards those heavily regulated items like acquisition. And of course, just other things like cross-agency priorities, partnering, changes in leadership, changes in workforce, all of the things that you don't even need to be in or around the federal environment. Just turn on the news and you see how chaotic it must be to try to manage projects and programs in the federal environment. So for those reasons, they, of course, have their own federal-specific certifications and learning paths around project and program management. I think you mentioned supporting DLA. Somebody did, forgive me. I don't know. Somebody, yeah, there we go. Sorry about that. So with DLA and DoD, they're subjects to the DoD Acquisition Workforce Certification, formerly called DWIA, with an equally complicated, what that acronym stands for. And I'm not going to talk too much about DWIA or the current Acquisition Workforce Certification, but I mention it because it actually predates FAC-PPM. I don't spend as much of my time in the DoD world, but FAC-PPM certification was sort of initially modeled after this DWIA certification that focused on improving the acquisition management for federal agencies. On the FAC-P side, as I said, it stands for the Federal Acquisition Certification in Programs/Project Management. And in all of my classes, I sort of unpack this definition because there's a lot going on in that. Programs/Project Management. Wait a second. Everybody in this room knows that those are two different things. As we'll talk about, they're not as different in the federal environment as they might be, because when you're a federal project manager, managing what the federal government might call a project, there's already an element of program management within that we'll talk about. The short version is, if you have contractors doing contracts, is in each of those contracts a temporary endeavor undertaken to deliver a unique result? Oh, that sounds like a project. So it already sounds like if you're managing, quote, a project that has multiple contracts supporting it, okay, it sounds like you're managing a program already. FAC-P was initially launched in 2007, updated in 2013. Federal employees are eligible. So on my laundry list of certifications, FAC-P is the one that I don't have, in fact. But the goal is to standardize training and experience requirements for project and program managers in that federal space. The certification is issued by the agency, although controlled at the federal level by the Federal Acquisition Institute. And as it mentions on the slide, there's an entry, mid, and senior level. Please. Interesting. And what I find is that different agencies, and for those that didn't hear it online, he just mentioned that not being in the acquisition workforce specifically might not be eligible to pursue for FAC-P certification. I found different agencies have different kind of expectations on that. I meet a lot of folks who maybe even go through the classes, and whether or not they're pursuing certification might not even be on my radar, but I'm glad you added that in, because that's an important consideration. The goal is certainly to train the federal acquisition workforce in program and project management best practices. Again, with this sort of backwards idea, backwards is my term, of course, that the acquisition is the main thing and a project is somehow a part of that. I want to convince everybody that I talk to that it's the opposite. Acquiring goods and services, one of the many things that you do as part of your project, right? So, in terms of some of those areas that make the federal environment so incredibly complex, just diving a little bit deeper into some of those items. As I mentioned a moment ago, most federal projects include the acquisition of goods and services from contractors, and so therefore, because of acquisition regulations, that already adds a lot of complication into the process. And as I alluded to a moment ago, even if you're a project manager in the federal government, you're arguably doing more program level work of coordinating and integrating the results of different projects when you consider that to each of your contractors working on different projects or different contracts, all of which support your project, well, to the contractor, their contract is a project. It's the whole project for them. So if you're managing a project, you're already kind of doing program management work, overseeing different teams, carrying out different projects within your overall scope. I think the 8th edition of the PMBoK guide has really gone in some positive directions around procurement management and actually getting a little bit more in depth in that area. But even historically, kind of the PMBoK guide approach to procurement was make sure you involve your procurement stakeholders, talk to them, make sure they're in the process. Federal PMs are among the procurement stakeholders. It's not a different group that they're talking to. Sure, there's a contracting office, but also the PM is very much one of those procurement stakeholders front and center for the acquisition process. So that knowledge is critical for federal PMs, even those that aren't going to be playing in like a contracting officer representative or contracting specific role. Another important consideration is that the way the federal government approaches operational work, which according to the PMBoK guide, projects are distinct from operations, right? Projects are temporary and discrete. Operations are ongoing and repetitive. Now, technically, this is more true of program management in the federal environment, but I think especially when you have FAC-P PM teaching both program and project management at the same time, the waters get very muddy in terms of operations and maintenance actually being managed as a part of a project lifecycle. And again, if you want to nitpick, it's technically a part of the program lifecycle, but we're often using the exact same lifecycle to teach project management and program management simultaneously. So to the federal PM, project or program manager, operational work that will follow on from that project is very much on their radar and something that they're supposed to be planning for. It's not so much a handoff to the operations team for them to start figuring it out. It's more like handoff to the operations team, and we've already figured out all your plans for you, and hopefully we involved you in some of that planning. Imagine that. And then, of course, the perhaps most obvious kind of distinction between the federal environment and the commercial environment is the mission-driven motives, right? Commercial organizations, for good and for bad, right? It's the profit motive, and sometimes decisions are simply based on, are we going to make more than we spend? In the federal environment, you're almost never going to make more money than you spent doing the project. You're probably not going to make any money. Even in the rare circumstances where a system might be revenue generating for the agency, it's not the same as, well, we built this thing and then we sold it and we reaped the profits. It's mission driven. Benefits to society, benefits to you and me, taxpayers, right? Citizens. I spent a lot of time working for the Department of Veterans Affairs and their VA Acquisition Academy. Talk about mission driven and service driven organization where, you know, they're spending in the hundreds of billions of dollars a year and not expecting to see that return on investment financially. So that's a big difference from how commercial organizations might be making decisions. And I promise I won't bore you with the details of all of these laws, policies, and regulations, but more so just as a category, that's another unique constraint of the federal environment. Heavily regulated, a lot of rules you got to follow. And those rules aren't just decided by the local director of whatever who may or may not even work here next month, and we'll just rewrite the policy if we feel like it, or we'll just ignore the policy if we feel like it. These are laws passed by Congress. They're, in some cases, rarely, but legitimate criminal repercussions for violating the laws, policies, and regulations that federal PMs are subject to. We always remind ourselves that nobody has gone to jail for an unauthorized commitment, but that they could. So things like the federal acquisition regulation that govern acquisition processes in civilian agencies. Things like Office of Management and Budget publications like OMBA 11 that governs the budget request and management process. System-specific regulations, so Federal IT Acquisition Reform Act and Klinger-Cohen, which not only deal with management of IT services and infrastructure and needs, but even down to the detail of, like, there might be rules on how you build it, right? Your system might need to be compliant with codes X, Y, and Z, regulations A, B, and C. So not even just like project management processes being regulated, but also the actual things that we're delivering on the project. You know, maybe your information system is going to be subject to 508 compliance. Maybe the new hospital you're building is subject to ADA and ABA compliance for building codes, things like that. And I did mention that somewhat recently, I think about 10 years ago, Congress did pass, with a lot of support and help from PMI, the Program Management Improvement Accountability Act. And again, I hope I'm not throwing stones or talking trash by saying so, but we often joke with a lot of the folks that I talk to. They say, yeah, I've never heard of that. And we'll show them this document about like a 5-year implementation plan. And I think the joke is that everybody's still in their 5th year one of that 5-year implementation plan, 5 years deep into it. But what it's supposed to do is be promoting adoption of program and project management best practices. And again, for me, this is the groundbreaking revelation of, like, yes, it's a project that you're managing, or if it's a collection of related projects organized to achieve shared benefits, then it's a program that you're managing. It's your project. It's your program. It's not just something you're buying. Not just something you're acquiring, right? So we see these as being like the three decision drivers in the federal environment: requirements, budgeting, and acquisition governance. And in this great juggling act graphic that I borrowed from some old course materials, the idea is that the project manager really lives at the intersection of those things. These are three different spheres of influence, each with their own rules, their own rule books, their own rule makers, their own decision makers, none of which might even feel like talking to or cognizant of the others at the time that they're making their decisions. Requirements is very much need driven. What problems are we trying to solve? That's an ongoing exploration. The budget process, as we mentioned a few moments ago, is very calendar driven, right? Specific dates on the calendar that you need to have specific documentation submitted. And it might not matter that a new need emerged yesterday. Well, again, we needed to start planning for new needs long before we knew about them. Budget process, very calendar driven. And then that acquisition process is really more event driven, based on the award of contracts and the planning for those contract awards. So again, each of these governed by different rules. All of those rule books were not necessarily written in conjunction with the other, with the idea that a project manager would be living at the intersection of all three. So for federal PMs, they've got a tough road. They've got really the world being carried on their shoulders in terms of trying to navigate these three different systems without having direct authority over any of them. And before I get too long-winded, too late, I'm just going to have the clock out here so that I don't take up too much of your time. And the last thing that I wanted to highlight as unique constraints of the federal environment: vast stakeholder audience. Stakeholder is my favorite definition in project management. Comically broad. A stakeholder, as you know, is anybody who is or perceives themselves to be affected by your project or having some effect on your project. So let's kind of logic that out for a bit. Who could potentially be or perceive themselves to be affected by, or maybe even having some effect on, the projects and programs managed by the U.S. federal government? Allow me to answer for you. How about every citizen of the United States and every citizen of every country that might ever interact with the United States now or in the future? We got people up in space. You don't even have to be on this planet to be a stakeholder on federal projects, and I'll bet those people up in space consider themselves key stakeholders, because it's the government that's going to bring them back home in many cases, right? So there's nobody who's not a stakeholder on federal projects. And as I tell the students, like, good news, you don't have to invite them all to the meetings. It's not going to be an 8 billion person conference room, but there are so many people paying attention. Legislation, executive branch, private industry, the judicial branch has in both directions, both affected by and having some effect on. So there's absolutely nobody in the world who's not affected by or paying attention to federal acquisitions and program management. You know, we mentioned kind of some of the benefits of working for smaller organizations. Like, one of those benefits is if you make a small mistake, it doesn't show up in the Washington Post the next day. Many of your organizations and clients, if they make even the smallest of mistakes, it'll show up in every newspaper the next day, right? So vast stakeholder audience, unique constraint of the federal environment. I'll of course take questions at the end, but if there are any questions along the way, by all means, let me know. Tracking so far? Good to go? Excellent. So FAC-P PM certification specifically has the training and experience elements to it. From a training side, we teach curriculum around these 7 competencies defined by the Federal Acquisition Institute, which is actually both the governing body of FAC-P PM and a training provider of FAC-P PM training, although not the only training provider. So the competencies that we'll talk about, and we'll see kind of a crosswalk from PMBoK guide principles and performance domains to these FAC-P PM competencies in a couple slides. Things like requirements development and management, systems engineering, test and evaluation. I don't know why I'm looking at the slide. I could say it in my sleep. Lifecycle logistics, contracting, leadership, and business cost and financial management. Stepping away from the camera for just a moment, I really think of these first four as being the deliverable and scope-focused competencies, right? Requirements development and management. What is it that we're going to need? Systems engineering. How do we build the thing that we need? Test and evaluation. How do we make sure we built it in a way that meets the requirements? And life cycle logistics. How are we going to support it after it's been delivered? Put a pin in that because that sounds like operational work, which is not part of a project technically, but it is in the federal environment. Business cost and financial management is exactly what it sounds like, except also schedule. They don't mention it in the name, but business cost and financial management also refers to schedule development and schedule management, contracting with the focus on acquisitions, and of course, leadership. Oh, and I did want to mention, those entry, mid, senior tiers of FAC-PPM certification, they all have different training and experience requirements. And I do really think, as it says on the slide, at the entry level, we want people to know and understand. At the mid-level, we want PMs to be able to apply what they know. At the senior level of FAC-PPM certification, it's really about leading large projects and programs and cultivating project managers who can also lead. So kind of really just going beyond the execution. I highlighted this as being typical FAC-PPM training curriculum because it's not the only track of courses that you could take. I mentioned that I actually support the VA Acquisition Academy, and because VA is such a large acquisition-heavy organization, they kind of have their own learning track. It's still all the same competencies and performance outcomes, but they have a slightly different series of courses. But as you can see, at the entry level, it's kind of two basic overview courses, each about a week long. At the mid and senior level, now we're getting into topic-specific courses where it says applications or progressive concepts in program management, that's on those first four competencies, right? Systems engineering, requirements development, lifecycle logistics, and test and evaluation. And then the other competencies all get their own classes: contracting, business cost and financial management, leadership. Much like PMP certification, you gotta maintain your continuous learning. So we have PDUs here in our environment. They have CLPs for their continuous learning points. Got to earn 80 CLPs every 2 years to stay certified. And the great thing is, as is true for us, right? If you're certified in a whole bunch of stuff, you can probably earn PDUs and apply them to every certification you've got. So the folks that are FAC Core, FAC-C, FAC-PPM, PMP, Scrum Master certified, they take one class and then they apply those 40 PDUs to everywhere. It's a nice system. So as I said, I'm sorry. Phew. Yeah. It's nice. And they even have some, well, I don't know enough about it, but there's even like reciprocity. If you have a PMP, you don't automatically get FAC-PPM, but you can automatically get some CLPs for it. So again, doing a bit of a crosswalk between the performance domains of the PMBoK guide, recently updated for version 8, and those 7 FAC-PPM competencies. There's not a clean, clear one-for-one relationship, but we could make some loose connections. When we're talking requirements, development, and management, it's all about scope, about defining the requirements that must be fulfilled and the deliverables that will fulfill those requirements. I'm always insisting to my students at the entry level that they can change their mind on this with a more mid or senior level understanding, but at the entry level, scope is the what. Requirements are the conditions that will be fulfilled. Scope is the deliverables that will fulfill those conditions. And then schedule is a whole different thing when we're talking tasks and verbs and so forth. Systems engineering. This is the competency that really focuses on how to build the thing that we're building. Typically, the goal would be to have, even for an acquisition, a federal systems engineer who has the technical know-how to oversee the contractor's work and deliverables, especially if what the contractor is doing is designing and building something for them. Well, the government systems engineer should be the ultimate sign-off of what that design looks like, those building processes and so forth. even if the government's not performing the work, they need to be in the loop on how that work is being planned and performed. So we could align that to PMBoK guide performance domains like governance and really scope, schedule, risk, and I probably could have put the other 4 on that list too, but it just seemed excessive when the rest of them only had 1 or 2 listed. Test and evaluation. This is another thing that deals closely with risk. And of course, scope, making sure that the scope is delivered within requirements. Lifecycle logistics, governance and risk, business and finance is the finance, resources and governance for contracting, and of course, resources and stakeholders for leadership. I wanted to back up and just say another word about lifecycle logistics to acknowledge that because the PMBoK guide does make that distinction between projects and operations, there isn't really a project performance domain I could point to that would directly align with logistics, because lifecycle logistics refers to preparing for operations, making sure that the thing that we delivered stays operational, continues to meet its requirements for its entire useful life. I ran through those quickly. I'll be happy to circle back if there are any questions about them, but I'll keep us moving here because there's just a couple other similarities and differences that I want to highlight, like life cycles. And again, this is kind of an older graphic, older version of the PMBoK guide, but not irrelevant to the 8th edition, where your basic generic project life cycle would consist of like an initiation phase, a planning phase, an execution phase, and a closeout phase with monitoring and controlling always happening, right? Some series of phases, maybe more than one phase for each of those topics. In the federal environment, I think what first comes to mind for a lot of the students in FAC-PPM training is the contracting process, which, as I've alluded to a few times, I'm working as hard as I can to help them realize, wait, your contract is only one small piece of the project. So the contracting life cycle of acquisition planning, contract formation and award, and then performance and administration of that contract, that's not the same as your project life cycle. The federal team members have months to years of internal planning and work to do before they get to be ready to award a contract. One of the generic life cycles that is used commonly by the Federal Acquisition Institute, and therefore by pretty much everybody else that does FAC-PPM training as well, is this 6-phase life cycle. And again, I won't necessarily bore you with all of the details, but it starts with concept definition. This is the initiation phase in which we're figuring out whether or not there's going to be a project. PMBoK guide would call that pre-project work and not treat it as a phase of the life cycle, but in the federal environment, it's the first phase of the life cycle. A concept planning phase to create our plans, a development phase to execute those plans, and implementation phase to roll out the system that has been created. And then, of course, the notable difference that I'm leading to is that operations and maintenance phase. And again, this might just be a quirk of the training environment, but we would be using this same life cycle to teach project and program management at the same time. And, imagine, and many of you probably don't have to think too hard to imagine this, being a confused entry-level learner who barely knows the difference between a project and program and is still trying to wrap their head around, well, wait a second, how can I use this same life cycle for both when operations and maintenance is technically not even a part of the project? So that's just yet another kind of nuance of the environment that kind of relates back to Congress doesn't give us money to build a thing. Congress gives us money to have a thing beginning to end. So just recapping some of what we saw in those different life cycle approaches. Big difference in project initiation. PMBoK guide really treats project initiation as something that happens before and beyond the role of the project manager. And it's true in the federal environment that usually the PM's not involved in the concept definition or whatever that first initiation phase might be. But in our FAC-PPM training, we definitely put a lot of emphasis into how is the need defined? How do we identify the capability gaps? What potential concepts could be considered for addressing those capability gaps? And, again, months to years of work, just figuring out if there's going to be a project, let alone who's going to manage it and how. So for FAC-PPM, it's really the concept definition phase is that kickoff, and ideally the project manager could even be involved in what will eventually be the project that they're going to manage. As I said, the operations piece is probably the biggest glaring distinction when you're thinking of federal project management, which really treats operations as a part of the project anyway. It's kind of, at least in the circles that I have conversations in, probably not everywhere, there's really that mindset of, no, this is the life cycle and that's what it would be for a project or a program. And to the point where for budgeting, those years in advance budget plans, having to account for not only how are we going to pay to buy the thing, how are we going to pay to have the thing, to use it, to keep it operational. From a requirements management standpoint, this is where acquisition really does take center stage. It's often the expectation in the federal environment that the government will define the requirements, contractors will fulfill them. I spent a lot of words out of my mouth just trying to convince folks, well, you've got some internal requirements as well, but sure, getting the right requirements into our requirements description documents. And sort of the challenge with the acquisition process is, while there are plenty of systems in place to encourage exchange of information between government and vendors, government and industry before the solicitation, ultimately, there's still kind of this mindset that the way it's going to work is the government will hand off requirements in a contract and then may or may not be that involved in the actual work to fulfill those requirements. So the expectation is that your requirements are crystal clear, they're perfect. Anybody familiar with like a perfect requirement? Yeah, me neither. I've never seen one myself. And the old joke is, you know, the perfect contract is only one modification away. And no, everybody likes that joke. Nobody likes the actual implications of that joke being true. So we're defining requirements typically with the expectation of not these are the requirements we need to fulfill, but these are the requirements that we're going to have to communicate to industry. I think I said most of what I wanted to say about cost management in those early slides, so I won't dive too deep into that. But again, with that idea of a multi-year federal budget cycle, I think, you know, we would want as a best practice cost estimating to inform the budget, not the other way around. Not here's your budget, now shoehorn a cost estimate into it, right? Boss comes and says, hey, I want your honest estimate of how much this would cost. And oh, by the way, it better not be more than $10,000. That's going to be a big problem. And so now what do? You're kind of stuck in this ethical dilemma of like, well, did you want me to tell you how much I think it's going to cost? Or did you want me to tell you $9,999? That's kind of a pickle. It's kind of a jam to be in. And as it relates to things like earned value management, since I put it on the slide, not a lot of only major acquisition programs might be required to use a technique like EVM. But when we're teaching EVM in the classroom, it's always the conversation of, hey, you might not be using this, but if not, what are you doing instead? And is it objective? Does it provide timely data for decision making, or is it just, you know, some data point that isn't all that useful? As I know, it's already getting late in our evening, and I'm seeing just a few yawns. Excellent. Yeah, I think we got plenty of time, but I won't get too deep into budget terminology and flow for those unfamiliar. And this might just be a rehash of like your civics lessons from 20 or 50 years ago, whatever. Congress appropriates funding, then the authority goes down to OMB. OMB performs apportionment, and now that budgetary authority rolls down to the agency. The agency performs allotment, meaning assigning budgets to different projects and programs. And then for the acquisition process is where we see a commitment, like a purchase request to say, hey, we want to spend this money on a contract. An obligation where we actually sign the contract and say, hey, we are spending this money, and then the disbursement to pay invoices as they roll in. The budgetary authority is what flows. There's never any money. There's no, like, you don't get a big pile of cash that they hand to you. It's really just the budgetary authority that flows up and down that chain of command. And revisiting as a unique constraint what we said earlier, the vast stakeholder audience at every level, at every step of the process, there's always many layers of internal and external stakeholders who are paying close attention. Riveting stuff, I know. My goal today was to, if nothing else, maybe put it on somebody's radar that FAC-PPM certification exists, that they had never heard of it. Maybe somebody in the federal environment who's thinking, oh, I could get another certification after my name. Maybe a federal contractor who's thinking, you know, we always use these words, but I didn't realize that they're learning them in a slightly different way than I am. So that's my ultimate goal, is just to kind of have that awareness out there and help folks maybe have easier conversations with one another when they recognize that if they're both talking project management, one learned it straight out of the PMBoK guide, the other learned it straight out of the Federal Acquisition Regulation, which doesn't say one word about project management, there might be some disconnects there. So I hope that maybe on some small degree I've done that for some of you, or for some of you on the line, or somebody in the future. I invite any questions that you might want to ask on any topic. Yes, please.
Who's eligible for certification versus training?
Yes, it's a good follow-up question. And for those that didn't hear it, just in terms of who's eligible for certification and training, I'll admit, shame on me. It caught me off guard when Matt said, oh, not eligible because he's not in the acquisition workforce. It might be a VA thing, but I think that anybody who wants to sign up for FAC-PPM training in the Veterans Affairs environment, they can do that. So my answer a half hour ago would have been any federal employee. Now my caveat answer is, I think probably any federal employee could take training with approvals from their training managers and so forth. I could see it being possible that maybe that you're not eligible for certification unless you're in a job series that's the acquisition workforce.
Right. Like you can take all the training from VAU, which is down for you, but get certification. Please.
Yeah. That core training would be a whole separate certification as a part of federal acquisition certification.
Just a follow-up question. I've mostly been in the private sector, but I went to the public sector and take that side of being a federal employee to become more marketable for federal employees.
Great question. Alas, the answer is no. So again, the question was, can a non-federal employee take that FAC-PPM training to make themselves perhaps more marketable to the federal environment? Unfortunately, no, but certainly there are like external training paths. I don't know of specific certifications that I would just recommend off the top of my head, but certainly training paths where you could kind of walk in and have it showing on your resume, hey, I know a lot about your federal processes, even though I've been an outsider to that. Good questions. Bill, go ahead and. Knowledge-wise, 100% of it. 100% of your PMP knowledge shows up in FAC-PPM training. There's just a couple of acquisition things that you won't know from your PMP experience. In terms, on that part, no, you would still have to go through the training and experience requirements to apply for FAC-PPM, but it would likely only be going through the training, and maybe this is just my training professional bias, but who didn't enjoy a week-long refresher on project management? Come hang out with me. It'll be a lot of fun. And the training piece of it would be a requirement, but you would already have the experience requirements met, most likely. You have to document, depending on the level. So if it's entry level, it's 1 year of experience, but really that's in any role as long as you meet the specific experience elements that you're supposed to write to.
Talked about core training, completely separate state of describing, there's no overlap.
I would say there's a lot of overlap in content, but they're two separate like learning tracks and certifications. So again, in content wise, there's a lot of things that get talked about in core training that also get talked about in FAC-PPM training and vice versa. but it wouldn't be like, oh, I took this one class and it's applicable. I can apply for either cert as a result. There's FAC core training and then FAC PPM and training as a separate track. Good question. Sure. Whoop, there. This one? Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions that I can answer for anybody? How much time you got? Short answer, I don't know. I'd like to pretend to be an expert in that. I do expect something to come out. How game-changing an overhaul it is would be as interesting to me as to anybody else, because I know they're making waves in that.
How much of it survives? Anything's coming out. How much gets rewritten, spliced,
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And that's what I mean. If anybody's got an answer to that question, I think you should charge big money for it. I know that I don't, and so I won't. Good call. Good call. I certainly invite any final questions. I won't bore you with this stuff, but just resources you already know about, like the PMI-Montgomery County chapter website, which I got wrong on this link, but you already know how to find that. PMI.org, FAI.gov is your best source of information for FAC PPM training information. And I know a couple of folks are snapping photos, so I'll leave that up for another moment. FAI.gov is probably the one you're least familiar with of the sites listed on this slide. You can, of course, continue to take action by claiming your PDUs for this session. That's probably already hooked up for you because I think this Montgomery County chapter is really on the ball and doing great work. I always encourage everybody, share your knowledge, be a mentor, be a coach, take opportunities to speak in front of a group. Anybody that's willing to listen, I find that project managers are so generous with their knowledge, and I hope that never stops. Because, we can only do so much in the classroom, and it's really out in the real world where you learn that stuff. And it's from other practitioners that we learn it from. I hope to maybe inspire people to want to have those conversations. I don't expect that they should have all those conversations with me, right? So keep doing the great work that you're doing and helping people out there. My name is incredibly memorable, so reach out to me anytime in whatever way you can find me. Jeff Beverage, jeffbeverage.com. That's way easier to remember than cornerpostmanagement.com, so I'll leave it at that. And I appreciate the time that you've allowed me to spend with you this evening. It was a great pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Another round of applause for Mr. Beverage. PMI took a gap year, but they started a 50 under 50 spotlight program on an annual basis that they were acknowledging those kind of the next generation of project management experts. And I had the opportunity last January of 25 to do a fireside chat with Captain Reed Schaefer of the Air Force. And he actually wrote an academic paper on why the federal government and the military needs to apply more PMI standards and not just the DAU standards that are covered in FAC. So in our next newsletter, we'll have the YouTube video for tonight, as well as that academic paper and the fireside chat I had with Captain Schaefer, who's now a major. So, but that just shows that this is a real world problem, and hopefully over the next 4 years of the decade, we can seal that up and have a more synergy in training. So we know we took a little bit more of your time than advertised, so we appreciate it. Thank you for being members. Everyone in person, get home safe. Mr. Beverage is generous to give us time, as well as those who had a job and those who are looking for a job. Have a great night. Have a good summer. We'll see everyone via the conventional monthly meetings come September 3rd. Thank you.